This is Chris of P2T Canine, and welcome back to another Dog Talk. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, I certainly appreciate it. Welcome. If you are one of the subscribers and you watch all of them, thank you again for subscribing. I hope you're back because you have found the other ones to be useful and interesting, and you want to hear my take on another topic. So what is that topic for today? As I have mentioned in previous videos, my topics are often generated by the events leading up to a dog talk that take place at the day job, or interactions with other people in the dog training community. This one is kind of timely. It's an intersection of both. So since my last dog talk, the training at the day job, and then there was an Instagram post by Troster at Frequency Canine. If you are in the Panhandle and you need dog training, certainly look up my friends Troster and April down there. They can absolutely fix you up. They've got a great crew. And not only that, he's just a great follow on Instagram. Always putting up good content, always putting up some kind of interesting information. Thank you to Cooper, the Copper Moran Rooster. But he's always putting up something interesting that's worth a look. Very entertaining, a much more polished Instagram account than mine, but I'm getting there. Anyway, with that being said, this week's topic is going to be the e-collar. We want to talk about e-collar past and e-collar present. And with that in mind, kind of give you that arc. And for those of you, this may be your first video of mine that you're watching, just a little quick catch up. I'm in 25 years of dog work now, going back to 1999 before the global war on terror at a law enforcement agency. And with that being said, I've seen a pretty good piece of history as far as events prior to the global war on terror and where we are at this point post GWOT. So there's a few things that I'm going to be super specific about, and kind of per the usual arrangement with some other videos, there will be some things that I necessarily have to be somewhat vague about. But as with all the videos, there is no script, there are no notes. This is just going to be completely contemporaneous, well, extemporaneous, but just speaking completely. I'm going to murder a rooster. I really am. Oh, how do you work like this? And now as soon as I quit talking, he's, oh, 1 second. Yeah, come on. Stop it. Everybody knows. Oh, well. And I'm back. So, with that being said, just like always, going to speak straight off the top of the nugget here and give you my total views on e-collars, their use, my methodology, where my methodology came from, and so forth. So we're going to get right down to it. Starting out originally in the old days. So now we're going to go back all the way to 1999 when I first started in canine as at the police department at my law enforcement agency. And this was an agency in East Tennessee which had a huge following of a seminar. And at this point in time, Von Lick was the featured instructor, Ken Licklider and his staff. And then at that point in time, DADAC, Dogs Against Drugs, Dogs Against Crime, they were participants. And there were 2 seminars because Ken wasn't that busy. So there was a spring seminar and a fall seminar. And that was the pattern for several years until Ken started to get busier, and then it became a fall seminar only. And at that point, we kind of moved it closer to Christmas because over there in Sevier County, Tennessee, Dollywood, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the outlet shopping malls. So participants would bring their spouses and sometimes their families, and they would go out and shop and run around the local attractions during the day while we were doing the seminar. And it worked well. It was a huge draw and a big draw for that reason, because we were really blessed to have that kind of an area. So this thing was big. And saying all that to say this, they brought in lots of instructors. There were people from all over the Southeast, and of course departments up into Indiana. It was a big deal. It was a really highly trafficked seminar. So I got to see early on a lot of different people from different areas, different training groups coming in. And let's call this period, because I left the police department in January 2005. So we'll call this early period from 99 right into 2006, the early days of e-collar for me. And we will talk about that as the ghost of e-collar past, if you will. And what I saw was a lot of misuse of e-collar, a lot of lack of understanding. And the concept to me, as I saw it executed, and I am sure that some of these handlers and trainers didn't see it that way, but now looking back, these rearward facing analytics, I am certain that this is what they were doing. They may not have thought so at the time, but this is exactly what was happening. They were taking dogs that did not have a behavior, and they thought they were going to teach this behavior through straight compulsion via an e-collar. And I'm trying to pick the words precisely. I don't care about definitions. If you've seen my Instagram and any of my older prior videos, dogs can't talk. We can talk to them. We can see how they react. We interact with them. But as far as these hardcore definitions, this means this, that means that, you're using the word wrong, I don't care about that, because dogs cannot speak and give us definitive feedback on what definitions are and what things mean to them. So with that being said, I'm trying to use the most baseline common vernacular that I can in order to not get lost with, oh, you're describing it wrong or you're using the wrong terminology, because I don't give two shits about that. So these guys were using compulsion via the e-collar to try to teach a behavior that the dog either didn't have, didn't know, maybe was completely foreign. They didn't even have a foundational basis in it. And for some reason, they thought that if I just put this e-collar on it and hit it harder, that the dog was going to get what I was saying, even though they probably had no idea of what they were saying or an actual working foundation of what that word meant for them to do. This is the phenomenon you see when people are in a foreign country or they're dealing with someone who's not an English speaker, and they either just say it slower or say it louder, as if somehow that's going to finally break the barrier of understanding that I have no idea what you're saying, but if I just do it louder, then now you're going to get it. So this is a part where I'm going to be vague, because I'm not trying to start any online fights yet. I could in the future, but I could mention names right now of people that you might know or you could find, or maybe you have even dealt with, who got their asses eaten using an e-collar wrong. One of the most common is, oh, my dog doesn't out, and so now I'm just going to throw an e-collar on there, and I am going to burn this dog down with a really high level of stimulation and reiterate the out command of whatever that may be. And this dog is now going to let go. Looking back again, analyzing this, looking back, these dogs didn't have a good foundation for out. These dogs, and I've got some of this in past videos, if your dog does not out a toy, you do not need to be trying to get ready for a certification or doing some kind of patrol training and get your dog to out off of a person wearing bite equipment. That is just a fool's errand. If you do not have the foundational basis of this is a prey item, this is something you can put in your mouth and possess, and then I take it back when I say so based on a series of steps, maybe preparatory commands, stand still, stop fighting my dog, or the way that I do with most of my working dogs to out the toy is to the sit, to the down, to the stay, and then the out command, and then get that toy back. And a series of steps, setting them up mentally, taking these incremental steps of slowing down the mind and the body and relaxing the posture to prepare them to go ahead and be compliant. So these guys would grab somebody, put them in a barrel sleeve, which again, I can go back and parse out bite equipment, but for a whole host of reasons, that's also a terrible option. But to go ahead and throw an e-collar on a dog and then try to get them to out, screw it, I just grab it. Because if you're in a barrel sleeve and this dog is a good patrol dog or a little bit edgy and you're hitting them with an e-collar and you're trying to work an outing problem, if this decoy is a little bit light in the britches and they're not comfortable around your dog, and maybe your dog does have street bites, and this dog starts to break off of the bite, but they circle in close around your crotch, around your buttocks, behind you, it takes a pretty nervy helper / decoy to stand completely still and not want to spin or move. Chicken coming in the shop. Chicken! I am a ninja with flip-flops. So anyway, to get that decoy helper to stand completely still to provide maximum effect for the training to get this dog to out, doing it in a barrel sleeve is just a fool's errand to begin with, because now the decoy helper is going to be more sketchy. They're going to be apt to try to turn and take a defensive posture. Then the minute they move, the dog's going to read that as an opportunity to re-engage. It's just a giant debacle. So anyway, getting back on point, seeing the number of guys that you might know or have dealt with get bit during this process or create super problems was just astonishing to me. So early on, I was really reluctant to deal with the e-collar. Another piece of my personal story, my very first working dog was a KNPV PH2 Magnifique Malinois, and great dog. It was a marvelous first experience for a handler. Not everyone is that blessed or fortunate to get a dog like that on their first go round, and he didn't need an e-collar. This dog was amazing, and so because I had seen so many things go wrong in the hands of other people doing it, and I didn't need one, I was really kind of anti e-collar for several years. Moving ahead, so we're getting into the early 2000s. A guy that I meet along my career path is Brian Mowry, and Brian Mowry started out as a field rep for Tritronics, a huge name in e-collars at the time. And even back then, there weren't as many choices. You didn't have this huge market share for e-collars. I know there were some other ones because I remember people talking about them, but I don't remember the names that would be period correct for this time frame. But I know e-collar wise, Tritronics was pretty much the big name around. So Brian Mowry is a trainer and field service rep for Tritronics in this earlier period. And man, does he do a lot of T&E and research and development. And I'm not speaking out of school. This isn't me telling things that I shouldn't tell. This is from Brian's mouth to my ears in one-on-one in-person training. He will tell you, like a good trainer will, like Franco Angelini will tell you in the bite world, how he made a lot of mistakes, and a lot of his learning curve was from creating problems with dogs doing bite work before he really refined his training matrix, and in my opinion, probably put on the greatest 1 week bite seminar from start to finish for someone at any skill level. Back to Brian. Brian is the same. He told me in person in training during the period of time while he was working for Tritronics, he was developing new techniques and working through things. And he will tell you in person, I created a lot of problems. I created a ton of issues with dogs with the e-collar, finding my way through the e-collar world. Later on, Brian gets hired by the United States Secret Service to be their patrol dog trainer. So the Secret Service has two different sides to their program. They have the detection side, and then they have the uniformed patrol guys who go around with the protection details, and part of their force protection is having these dogs on the White House lawn. So these dogs are laser obedient. They have to be. Brian is a phenomenally good trainer, and a big piece of his training matrix is that e-collar. They have got to have laser precision control with their dogs at all times, and he has developed certainly one of the training matrices that I have borrowed from over the years to build my own. So this is a specific example of one guy that I learned a lot from, and will explain where he fits in. So he tells everyone, I was in the kitchen cooking, and I broke a lot of eggs making breakfast, but in breaking eggs, you learn a lot of things. And he was able to develop a lot of understanding through that trial and error period where he really smoothed things out. So he is very influential. And if you ever see a seminar available where he's going to be teaching e-collar, it is absolutely worth your time to go and listen to him, and then ask your follow-on questions as they pertain to you. So I leave the police department. I'm going to Iraq contracting in 2005. Still, I have a great dog on this mission going into Iraq. Did not need an e-collar, did not use an e-collar, and was totally comfortable with everything that I was doing in that period, going out, doing combat direct action for the U.S. Army in support of OIF-3. Didn't have any problems with that. Coming back from that, I got pipelined into the SOF MPC world. I was the first, and this is going to be another time where I'm going to be very specific. So I come back, I'm working at Von Litt Kennels. I run the first course for SOF MPC, and the first participants were 10 Special Forces, 7 Special Forces, 1 Marine, and then 3 handlers for the 75th Ranger Regiment. And even during that first class, we worked hard. We had a pretty good group of guys, and we accomplished everything we need to accomplish without an e-collar. And at that point in time, VLK still was not going to integrate any e-collar work into their classes. So we put the work in, and this is all building to a point. We put the work in, we turned out great finished products at the end of that class, and those guys went out, and if they integrated e-collar, it was after they got back to their unit and got into other training or got other guidance on how to integrate that e-collar. So during that class, the E8, the master sergeant who had researched this program on behalf of really the driving force behind it, Colonel Ed Reeder, colonel at the time, he was there from the Force Mod shop, and I was the first trainer hired for Special Forces. And because the origin of SOF MPC was 7th Group, 75th Ranger Regiment had the same idea, and then these two research arms of those two units kind of bumped into each other, and then they made a unified effort to develop SOF MPC going forward. But for SOF MPC on the Special Forces side, I was the first trainer hired. I was hired by the E8 who was out from the Force Mod shop from 7th Group, and he met me and worked with me and said, I want you to be the trainer from the unit that I represent. And off to Fort Bragg I went. Once we got there, we started building the program and developing it. We had a great first team sergeant / kennel master, and he bought all of the equipment, stuff that I didn't even think that we would need. He had a lot of vision. He said, now is the time. The program is new. We've got plenty of funding. Let's go ahead and build out this program and just grab some of everything and see where it takes us. And that turned out to be really visionary for the program going forward, because I was still thinking in terms of a fairly small police department. Oh, you know, don't get crazy with the budget, don't blow it all out at once. And he says, no, that's not how it works here. When you have the green light to spend and the wind is at your back, let's go ahead and get everything, and we'll sort it out as we go along, which turned out to be the exact right answer. So first deployment, SOF MPC 7th Special Forces Group 2007. No e-collars were used in support of this entire deployment. We deployed 2 dogs, 2 handlers, 2 teams were the first go-around. We went out there, we did everything we need to do. It was a small group of dogs, only 2. I'm there full time, and we put in a ton of work, a ton of man hours, and e-collars weren't necessary. Going into year 2, 2008, we added 5 or 7 more dogs for 7th Group going into year 2, 2008. Great dogs, put in a ton of work with these dogs. And this is where I began to really start to feel my way into the e-collar world. So I was a younger guy back then, and even still, we were into guys that were a little bit younger than me or close to the same age, but the younger guys grew up in the remote control era. And now this is where we start to really get into an important topic that is central to this entire discussion. As stated before, at the time of this recording, I am soon staring down the barrel of my 50th birthday, born in 1974. I grew up in the non-remote control era. Non-remote control for anything. The TVs didn't have remotes. The stereos didn't have remotes. The toys, if they were remote control, they were corded. So it was a short cord to a little toy airplane or car or something of that nature. RC, true radio control, was still really expensive in the consumer segment, and you just didn't see it much. And for those of us who grew up in that period of time, as a kid, you were the remote. If the channel needed to be changed, if the rabbit ear antennas needed to be adjusted, that was your job. Hey, get up and go fix the TV. Hey, get up, go turn it up, turn it down, change the channel. That was on us. So we were the effective remote control for the 70s all the way into the 80s. I'm trying to think back. I graduated high school in 92. My parents were not the, oh, I'm going to go buy something right now, I got to have the latest and greatest. So I'm sure it was 1990 or later before we had our first TV that had an honest to goodness remote control. Even the first VCRs had a corded remote, and it was Again, late 80s, probably early 90s before we even had the infrared wireless remote for the VCR in our house. So saying all that to say this, how does that come over to the dog side? I wasn't used to pushing a button to make things happen. You physically get up and you go participate in the thing to make the thing happen. So with that being said, as I start seeing younger handlers come into the space, now I'm starting to deal with personnel who grew up in a more technologically savvy age, in a more tech age where everything had a remote. Golly, I'll kill you. Get out. Get out of your mind, son. Oh, so the nice truck, the Dodge Power Wagon, is out in the driveway, and I'm sitting in its spot. Off, baby girl. And the stupid rooster that was on the deck rail crowing was just taking flight to jump up there, and he landed on the rock guard on the front of the truck before he was getting ready to get up on the hood. So that's what that was all about. Anyway, I'm starting to deal with a younger, more tech savvy handler, and they wanted the easy button. That commercial campaign was already on TV, and I kept telling them, we're not pushing the easy button. This takes work, it takes development, it takes rapport. You don't just throw an electronic device on your dog's neck and start hitting the button. And my fear was, because these guys were more tech savvy and they were used to having something in their hand that they pushed the button on to make things happen, that they would just get heavy handed with the e-collar. So 2008, we have a full kennel deployment again, back to Afghanistan, back to OEF, and no e-collars were used during that deployment. And again, we had no issues. Did not lose a dog to running away or not having a recall. No assaulters or team members were bit. We didn't have any problems getting the dog to out or come under control during live bite encounters. Where are you going, baby boo? Come here. Off. Don't go wandering off. We didn't have any issues, and guys were getting live bites on target, and no problems were experienced due to a lack of an e-collar being present. So now we're going into 2009. The program expands yet again, get more guys in, we get some newer dogs. The timeline is compressed, and now I have handlers in onesies and twosies start coming to me. I really want to use an e-collar. My dog just won't maintain the down. It won't down as soon as I give it the down command. It's not as fast. It's not as crisp. It doesn't hold as long. I want an e-collar to put on my dog. So at this point, I kind of feel the tide shifting, and that the e-collar thing is going to have to be addressed in some way. And so I tell these handlers who were inquiring, I said, let me tell you this. We've got the collars. We will use the collars. Give me 3 weeks. We're going to work. We're going to focus in on these problems. And you do everything that I go out and do with you and tell you to do over the next 3 weeks, and we will collar up your dog. We're going to do these preparatory steps to get them ready for the e-collar. And at the end of 3 weeks, handshake deal, we're going to put an e-collar on your dog. But during that 3 weeks, we put the work in. We put the work in. I'm going to say it one more time. We put the work in, and at the end of the 3 weeks, I go to the handler and I said, well, here's your e-collar. Well, I don't really need it now. Oh, holy cow. Revelation time. Yes, because when you put the work in, you build the rapport, you teach the task, you pay the task, you correct off-task behavior, you get this dog dialed in, all of a sudden, you have all of the behaviors you need and they are reliable. And now the e-collar kind of falls by the wayside. So now I'm talking about me and specifically our experience in the 7th group MPC arena. You put in the work, you get the behaviors. The guys just said, well, yeah, I'll take it with me in case I feel like I need it. And they never did. They didn't use it because they put the work in. So as this whole arc in history is taking place, the punitive use of an e-collar, the compulsion method of I'm just going to use this electronic stick to hit you with when you don't do what I say, is really starting to show the problems that that kind of ideology and outlook creates. And now units within special operations are starting to look for better solutions. And now I have to be vague again. There's one man in particular, credit where credit is due, who was a handler and training NCO at the highest priority unit in the Department of Defense, who was also a duck hunter and bird hunter, wing shooting, all of that stuff, and loved bird dogs. And so he's at work training dogs for combat for special operations and also using them on target. And then in his personal life as his hobby, he's using gun dogs and retriever dogs to go bird hunting and duck hunting. And early on, and it's not just that he came to me, I was one of the people he discussed this with, but he's starting to make the rounds of everyone in the community and saying, hey, I'm doing this stuff with bird dogs, and I feel like the use of the e-collar and the way we train the e-collar could have some application within the special operations and special forces community and SOF MPC and all these other programs. And he says, I want to bring in some of these trainers that I've been working with in that arena and see what they can add to our program. And I said, well, why not? You know, I'm fairly curious about it. You know, I've seen field sport and dog trials and I know about them, but I've never delved deeply into the how and what takes place to develop one. And again, speaking specifically, there are two names that they brought early on into this endeavor, and that's George Hickox and Pat Nolan. And Pat Nolan is pretty big at this point in time. Not then that I'm speaking to, but now in 2024. Hi, baby girl. Off. He was a bird dog trainer, Pat Nolan, at this point in time, doing bird dog things. He had no tactical directional canine business. He wasn't even looking that direction, but he was great with an e-collar and teaching bird dog behaviors, and very quickly things that had never been part of the special operations community or SOF MPC before now started to integrate. So place tables and place training, the force retrieve, using the e-collar to build stimulation and to build drive, not to just rein drive in or stop behaviors, but using the e-collar the way bird dog trainers do. Don't knock that tripod over, please. But using that low levels of stimulation to enhance behaviors, to make them even more energetic and to create more compliance and understanding of a task, that started to make its way into the community. And I thought, okay, now this is something that I think is useful and this interests me. And Pat Nolan, you've got my attention. And now I'm going to be specific, and we're going to mix timelines. Now onto the scene is also George Hickox, a very high-end bird dog trainer, kind of a Southern gentleman type, well-groomed mustache, very congenial chap, and a lot of fun to train with. Prior to George Hickox, I had seen exactly what George Hickox was on a campaign to defeat, to fight against. I had absolutely seen in my canine experience prior to this 2008-ish time frame, I had seen in the police community guys who'd had outing problems and had an e-collar on their dog, and they were wearing two e-collars, one around the neck and one around the waist, with the contact points on the bare skin just aft of the rib cage back there in front of the dog's back legs, and trainers using two remotes and using two e-collars on a dog to get them to out. I'm watching this, and these dogs are absolutely stemmed into the stratosphere. They are way out into the red. They are no longer clear-headed. If these dogs did out by sheer overpowering amounts of stimulation, they were gasping for breath because the stimulation was so intense. They had the big shoestring bloobs of slobber and snot coming out of their mouth and nose. As far as a useful application for police or for special operations community, this was absolutely useless. This dog was so geeked out of its mind that it was only complying in this very small space, and it took a ton of stimulation. And as far as anything useful, it was not. This was a complete waste of time. And could you absolutely just bang a dog with E and maybe get through a certification 5 minutes after you do this while the dog is still gassed, and get your stamp on your paperwork for the next calendar year so you could be certified? Yes. And I saw people do that, and they got by year to year like this. But is that useful, sustainable? Can it create more problems? Yes, it absolutely can and does, and that is not the way ahead. So I meet George Hickox, who's brought in to teach what he's doing, and he calls these dogs case hardened, that you have screwed up so bad introducing your e-collar and teaching the lessons of the e-collar that now you are in these ever increasing levels of stimulation to where the dog, and this is George's terminology, you have made a case hardened dog. This thing is so tough that you've maxed out one e-collar, you've put on a second e-collar, you've maxed out the adjustment on that remote, all the way to the point where this dog can just ride the lightning and eat two e-collars. And George Hickox has an entire methodology where he, and I have seen it, this is not hearsay, this is not I've heard of, this is I have stood in the room and outside and on the O course, and I have watched George Hickox take a dog that was wearing two e-collars or had one maxed out and get it down to a level of stimulation where you could hold that receiver with the contact points in your hand and you could barely feel it. It was barely perceptible. It was less than your average static electricity shock when you touch a light switch leaving a room. And this dog would snap to and perform these crisp obedience maneuvers, compliance tasks, come off of that bike, come into the heel, sit down, stay, boom, 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 boom. And that dog had been on a maxed out or even double e-collar, and it was back to just the stimulation that you could barely feel in your hand. That is a fact. What happened to George? George got a little too specific about the where and the who he was doing this with. And if you want to go and scour the internet and find that, the internet is forever. It's probably still out there. I'm not going to mention it here because I don't want to put myself in a jam, but he was absolutely telling the truth He got in a bit of trouble for telling too much truth and being too specific about the what, the where, and the who, but he's not a liar. He absolutely did it, and I was there physically in person to witness it. So George had Notify Correct. So on one side of the house with Pat Nolan and other trainers, we're getting into the markers, the click treat. I'm teaching a new behavior. So I hit my clicker and then I pay that. And then I need it more and more specific and better as I go along. George Hickox also used click treat for his foundational training for the e-collar. And so with markers, where you can mark a behavior and the dog is mentally conditioned to, oh, I just completed that and I've marked it and now payment is forthcoming. And as we expand on that training, we can mark more and more behaviors, and what I call, and maybe other people call it too, but then that's in the point of training, I call it stacking behaviors. So when we're on a one-to-one, every one thing you do gets one reward. Now I'm going to start extincting out that schedule, making more and more reps required between behaviors that are successful before the dog gets paid. And now I call it stacking. And maybe other people do too. I'm not trying to steal or not give them credit. Two people working independently can arrive at the same place. So when I teach the place board, once they're on the place, mark and pay, that's one behavior. Now I'm teaching them the sit. That's another behavior that they can give me. Then the down, then going into the crate, teaching the kennel command on a crate that has no door. That's included in the tactical exercise, ultimate tactical exercise, maybe video, but getting them to go into the crate. And now once I've clicked and paid and marked all these behaviors on a one-to-one, now I'm going to start getting 2-to-1 and 3-to-1 and getting into that variable schedule and doing what I call the stacking. Now I'm going to stack them together. Now instead of just getting on the place table, get on the place table, sit, and then go to the down, and I'm going to be marking each one of those that payment is forthcoming in the future, and I'm paying them one time for 3 behaviors. Or now I'm getting them to do the 3 and then go into the kennel. Then I'm getting them to do obstacles on the O course, and I'm extending the period between actual payments, whether it's food treats or toy reward. And now I'm setting myself up for them to do a lot more for less. George Hickox has a concept that he calls Notify Correct. So we have markers with click treat, and now he says that there's Notify Correct. And I've seen him do it in person. Just being straightforward with you, I'm not as competent in wielding his methodology in this, but the thumbnail sketch of it is this. He is a high-end bird dog trainer, sportsman, and competitor for gun dog sports. And he says when your dog is out there competing, if they screw up, you cannot take the time to correct them on the e-collar during the competition. You can't derail what you're trying to accomplish at that point in time. He says, but the concept to the dog is no different. I'm going to give them the low-level stimulation. I am going to mark that behavior. Chicken! Getting ready to fire another flip-flop. Oh, he turned around. He made the right decision. Or she. That's one of the hens. So he says you can't stop what you're doing in the moment in competition because you still have to compete and gain all the points possible in the competition. So I can't correct the dog, but I can notify them either with vibration mode on the collar or low level E. I'm going to let that dog know, hey, you just screwed up. You done screwed up, kid, and you're going to get corrected after the fact. So he says, once he's made all those notifies, then you can leave the training field and then you can do your higher level correction with stimulation out in the parking lot after the fact when you're out of the training venue. And I've seen him do it and it absolutely works, and his dogs had no negative behaviors or impacts from the Notify Correct. I just don't use it because I'm not as competent at doing it as he is. So if you tell me that markers with I can click or verbally mark a behavior and that we can continue working and I can pay you after you complete more tasks, if that works, there's no way that the inverse can't also work, that Notify Correct can't be true, that we can mark bad behaviors and yet still require you to go through a series of events prior to getting the e-collar correction. And I've seen him do it. So George was very influential in me building my training matrix. And there's another matrix, and I've worked with numerous other trainers who had similar and other little pieces. That I don't want to make this video so long that it's another movie. Anyway, so George has part of his training methodology is teach the dog the behaviors first. And he and I are eye to eyeball on this. And that's why being specific in the first multiple years of deployments for 7th Group and SOF MPC, we never fielded a dog with an e-collar, or if guys were given the option to take the e-collar, they didn't use it because we put the work in. So I like to go into a room, and this is exactly what George did. We would find a small room, a feed room, a utility room, and take every distraction out of this room. Another friend of mine at work 2 weeks ago now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks, we were at Muscatatuck Urban Training Center in Southern Indiana, the venue for the ATK9 seminar that takes place in the fall of each year that I also go to. And we went there with the day job to do training for a week. And a friend of mine, Todd Smith, that I met with my 3 years at the State Department, was able to come along with us. He is on Instagram at Trinity Canine Services, a guy with a ton of law enforcement experience, patrol trainer, Department of State employee handler for a period of years. Great guy with a lot of skill. He went with us to go out there and do some training. And if you look at Todd's Instagram with his training, he bought a prefab barn, prefab roll-off shed to put by his house where he does his pet training in. Trinity Canine Services is pet training, board and train in the Mid-Atlantic region. And Todd did, even without me talking to him about it, he picked up on it through other people or came to his own conclusion. He does the same thing as George Hickox. He got this tool shed that's enclosed, that has no distractors in it. There is just the items that we want the dogs to interact with in this very mundane, stripped down environment where I'm trying to teach something to the dog that the dog doesn't know. And there's not a ton of other things to get sidetracked by. We're not into the training phase of distractors yet. So we put them in this almost sensory deprivation tank, if you will, where there's not other things to pay attention to. There's me, maybe one or two other observers. In the case of George Hickox, George is doing the training. Me and a couple of other guys are in there observing the training, and we say nothing, we do nothing. There is nothing else going on. We may have the kennel or air crate with no door on it. We may have the place table, but there's one or two things in here, and that's it. So in Todd's little barn, he'll have his place table or the air crate, and you can see him doing training videos using this exact methodology. You're not going to have the dog being distracted or going off task by gaining interest in other things because there's nothing else in there to do. You've got 2 or 3 things in here that you can engage with for a reward for engagement and nothing else. So back to the George Hickox model, we go into this room, we take everything out, any sources of food, any vittle vaults, things like that, nothing else to be interested in or as little as possible. and then we allow them to engage with the things that we want them to engage with. George uses a lot of the extendable pointers with the little rubber ball on the end. He calls it a target, and he can hold that out there and the dog will go. And if the dog becomes curious and goes out there and bumps the end of that target, if he bumps that little rubber ball on the end of the extendable rod, he'll click that, and then he'll pay him with food. And then, oh, now we've got some action. And George is super patient. I was much younger back then and very bouncy and hyper. And I have been standing there, and in my head, I'm just screaming because we're standing there doing nothing. And he says, we want offered behaviors. We're going to mark and pay through a lot of self-discovery. And if it takes 10 minutes of standing here, listening to ourselves breathe, that's what we're going to do to get this dog to start engaging voluntarily. And then we get into the part where they're offering behaviors. So now we go into this room, we cut the dog off leash. This is several days into it. Now the dog starts throwing behaviors at us of all of the things that's been marked and paid for in the last few sessions leading up to this. The dog comes in and throws a sit and looks, and then we hit the clicker, but he doesn't get paid, and he waits, and then he throws it down, and we hit the clicker, and oh, they're excited. Oh my gosh, payment's forthcoming. But I didn't get paid. Let me throw another one. So they get up and they run into the kennel, and they turn around and they look out, and we hit that clicker, and finally we start paying them. But now we are showing understanding from the dog. We are showing initiative where the dog is giving us known behaviors on their own volition to try to work this system to their own benefit. Give me something, give me something. So now we're getting traction. With a dog that knows nothing, brand new, blank slate from scratch, we're not even saying anything at this point. We're just pointing or luring, having them follow a treat in our hand. I'll hold it in the air and rock it back over their head and get them to go into a sit. And then we can mark and pay that as they hit the sit. But we haven't even said anything yet. At this point, once this dog is starting to throw behaviors, now I go into the naming stage. And this is where I start giving that behavior a name. So if that dog comes into the room and they throw a sit, I'll hit that clicker, and then I say sit. And then I pay them the food or the toy reward for that. And now we start assigning a verbal name to the action. And so we go back through all of them, and we get a sit command, a down, a stay, a kennel. By using the kennel or the place board, we can, from the far side of the room, tell them place or sit, and then we can hit that marker, either the clicker or verbal marker, and pay them for that. They can go to the place board or the kennel on command, and then we call them back to us, and then on recall, we mark and pay that command and give it to them for coming to us. And George's training is, he says, now in this room, right here in this tiny space, he says, I have sit, down, stay, go away, and come here. He said, I have 5 super useful behaviors that now we can leave this room and start going out and getting this dog to do in other venues. So back to the George methodology, no e-collar has been used up to this point. We are teaching the behavior. We are getting voluntary compliance. We are getting them to throw us offered behaviors. Now we've named the behaviors. Now it's time for change of venue. Leave the sterile environment and move to something fenced in, the OB yard, or something a little bit bigger and controlled, but with more distractors. Now we're outside. There's chirpy birds. There might be squirrels running around. But we're going to go right back through the whole process of all of those behaviors in a new setting. So, George Hickox, in a tiny room, outside, once we have a 90% success rate, 9 out of every 10 times, and now once we're outside and we've got these behaviors named, once I can start calling for a behavior. Now we're going to move away from offered behaviors. Now we're going to call for behaviors. Even if they go and jump on the place table, I'm going to say here and call them to me, then go sit, down, stay. And if I can mark all of those and they do all of those on the verbal command, and I'm marking after the fact, and then I can pay them, now we have understanding. I am giving the name assigned to a behavior and they are doing it and they're getting paid for it. Now the dog has a workable system in their mind where they can get paid. They know what I'm talking about. This word has value. Very important. The word has value, and they know what that means to work the word, to do the behavior, to get the treat. Now we have a system going. At this point, we move to a third location, and if 9 out of 10 times I say sit and this dog sits and we are in our third venue and this is successful, now it's time for the e-collar. And why do we go through all of that? Because now we know that the dog knows what I'm talking about, and we can have a fair and ethical correction. That goes back to what I saw back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And in my view, looking backwards, that's why I think that these applications of the e-collar were wrong, and why it made me want to steer clear of the e-collar for many years, because looking back, these dogs didn't have a good, solid understanding of the structure, that there was a reward available, that you could get rewarded for good behavior, that you were corrected for bad behavior, or that they even knew what the actual desired behavior was in the first place. So now I'm learning stuff from George, and I'm thinking, yes, I'm good with this. I'm comfortable with it. If the dog knows what I'm talking about and can show me in 3 different venues at 90% success rate, now I am comfortable putting an e-collar on this dog and beginning to reinforce these behaviors to backstop compliance with some kind of stimulation from an e-collar. So now we go back into the tiny room, take away all of the space, the real estate, choke this thing back down, make it small again, and go back to the very first learned basics of, we're in this little austere room, and now you're going to jump on the table, you're going to go in the crate. How do we do that? With very, very low levels of stimulation. There's another key component to the understanding of a dog using an e-collar. Don't give them the option for non-compliance at this stage. So there's a lot of collars out there, all different kinds. Off, we're not leaving. Okay, there's a good example. I just picked up this e-collar and pulled the remote off of it, and this work dog, this German Shepherd, who is e-collar conditioned and fully trained as an MPC, just got up and started to come over here because she heard that remote come off of the collar. That dog didn't cower. That dog didn't look at that as a negative. When she heard that belt clip come off of here, she started to come up and was going to put her head in my lap, because this means, oh, we're going to go do fun stuff. So that was a completely unplanned sequence right there. When we get this e-collar, this is a Dogtra, and there's tons of them out there. I like the Dogtra for most everything. Teaching the basics of the e-collar. When you turn on the Dogtra, it's got a rheostat, and it has an adjustment level from 0 to 127, and it goes number for number. See, she still wants to put this thing on because she thinks we're going to do something. I turn it, and with very little effort, I can adjust from 1 all the way out to 127. 127 will make a grown man come off the ground. All the way through 10, I don't even know that I can feel 10. For me, in the palm of my hand, it usually takes about 15 or 16 for me to feel anything in my hand. You already ate breakfast. 20s into the 30s, I can feel that pretty easily. It's not uncomfortable. All of the work dogs that I do, your normal level of compliance is somewhere between 16 and 30. It's very, very low. So how do we get them to start understanding that? First rule, or first step, we want them to understand communications. Off. So we put this collar on, and now I'm going to, I know that this thing's already probably close to an hour. But I want to give a deep dive on this, a good understanding. There's another system out there where they can and do use the e-collar to teach completely unknown behaviors, and that's the pet training world. So most of your, and the big nationwide outfit right now, Off Leash Canine by Nick White, they've got local franchises everywhere. They have a 2-week board and train, which is where you bring a pet in who may know none of these behaviors. And in 2 weeks, they take that dog from knowing nothing to knowing all of these behaviors: sit down, stay, come here, place, and walking in the heel with no leash, all in a 2-week period. So do you have the time to do what I like to do and what George Hickox largely taught me, because I've got my own spin on a few things, but largely patterning my matrix on his, doing offered behaviors, marking and paying, 3 different venues, 90% success rate. Can you do that and get that done in 2 weeks? Absolutely not. But fortunately, in my model with my day job, I don't have to get it done in 2 weeks, and I can take my time and do it the way that I prefer. But for these pet training services, it's going to become cost prohibitive if you go longer than 2 weeks, and a lot of owners aren't going to want to be away from their dogs for 2 weeks. So saying all that to say this, there is a system out there where you can do it starting with the e-collar, and I'm going to try to touch on that and show you where those 2 systems meet and where they differ. But that being said, we go back into our room, George Hickox style, and we're going to put this dog on a leash, because to teach them how to control the stimulation to their benefit is how you want to introduce your e-collar. So I'm going to put the collar on them, and I'm going to start at 0, a nice snug fit. I'm going to work it around in the fur, make sure that the contact points are down to skin, and I'm going to start hitting the button. And I'm going to touch that button on continuous, not Nick, on continuous. I'm going to start hitting that button, and I'm going to start turning that up 1 or 2 levels at a time until I see a reaction. And I don't mean jump off the ground, stick to the ceiling. I mean the lowest level of reaction possible. So if that dog's walking around the room, sniffing around, doing something, kind of going about their own business, and that ear does this, if they're walking around and I hit that button and that ear turns and points back over their shoulder, or both ears lay down, or there's this tiny little, hey, almost, I got bothered by a mosquito, just a, what was that? A subtle look over their shoulder. That was weird. That's all I need. That was the lowest level possible for that dog to react, to show me they're now aware of that stimulation and they felt it. I have rarely seen a dog that's an absolute physical freak show, where on a Dogtra specifically, you get into the 30s or 40s without that first recognition that something's on there. If you have gone into the 30s on a Dogtra and the dog hasn't reacted in any way outwardly, stop what you're doing, go adjust the fit, maybe a little more snug, move it around in the fur, slide it around, check your contact points, make sure that they're screwed onto the unit securely. But that shouldn't happen. Certainly do not get into the 50 and above without checking fitment and contact of your collar and continue to turn it up and hit it, because there's a problem. And once this thing connects, it's going to be way too much. It's going to be over the top, and you don't want that. Go check your fitment, check contact, come back down to the mid-teens and start over and start escalating again. Do you see that? Once we have established communications, that's what I call it. Once I've got comms on the dog, I know that we have a connection, and they show me that minor acknowledgement physically that something just happened to them. Now we're ready to train. Now this is where we have to limit outcomes. Once you put that e-collar on the dog and you've made contact, I want to show them definitively what is the expectation. This is where we get into my method of dog training, and I call it the Wheel of Fortune method. And on the Wheel of Fortune, when you get to the end and you think you know what's going on, you say, Pat, I'd like to solve the puzzle. And that's why I call it Wheel of Fortune training. When I give the dog, I present them with a training situation and an option, and I give them the e-collar stimulation. I want them to say, hey, Pat, I'd like to solve the puzzle. I know what's going on. I know how to make the stimulation turn off and to get that positive marker and go ahead and get paid with food reward or a toy. And now I can manipulate this system to my advantage. So we put a leash on the dog on the Hickox method, on my method, to a dog that already knows the expectation, they know the behavior, and they know what they can get if they comply. So I want them to have no other option than success. Oh, baby, I'm sorry. Other than success in order to gain that reward and manipulate circumstances for a positive outcome for themselves. So I'm going to tell them place, and I'm going to hit that e-collar at this low level, and I'm going to immediately use the leash to guide them to the place table. And as soon as all 4 feet are on that place table, I'm going to release the stimulation, give them that verbal or click marker, and pay them. Then I'm going to tell them here, and I'm going to hit the E stimulation, pull them off of the place table and to me, mark and pay, and start to show them when that stimulation comes on and you hear a known command that you know what the answer is, solve the problem, you turn off the stimulation, you get marked and paid, and now life goes around in this ever-continuing circle of success, and you have the keys in order to deal with that stimulation. You know how to manage this system to your own benefit. And now we start doing everything. And I don't, the leash and limiting their options is absolutely, I cannot overstate the importance of this. If you go outside and you don't have a confined fenced in area and you're not on leash when you teach an e-collar to a dog, and the common language right now is collar conditioning. If you're trying to collar condition a dog and they have other options where they can make this e-collar quit other than the exact solution you want to present to them, example, you're outside, there is no fence, you tell the dog to place and you hit that e-collar and the dog runs the opposite direction into the woods, and one of two things are going to happen. Almost all e-collars have about a 6 to 8 second stimulation window where you have to let go of the button and then you have to hit it again to start a new countdown of 6 to 8 seconds of stim. Or you're going to have a dog run so far and so fast that you lose connectivity with the remote, with your remote unit and your receiver. These things get so far apart that the signal to stimulate no longer makes it to the receiver and the stimulation quits. Or you're just a human being with a conscience and this dog has run so far out of sight, you think, I can't possibly just keep holding this button and stimulating this dog, and I'm just going to let go. Now, I've spoken about this, and these are words that I live by. You have to understand how a dog views the world and how they learn and process information in order to train a dog. If you told that dog to do something, whether they understood the command or not, and they have the ability to go do something different and that stimulation quits. Either they separated themselves from the remote unit and the stimulation quit, whether you grew a conscience and let go. If this thing turns off by any other method than you getting the outcome that you want and marking and paying that, they just learned that's how you turn the E off. Now I'm going to go back real quickly in time to the bad e-collar training, to people you would know, pardon, if I said their name, who tried to teach a dog to out and they were standing right there and that dog turned around and bit them in the arm or grabbed them by the calf and they freaked out and let go of that remote. How did that dog just learn to control that stimulation? Oh, no shit. You hit me with that e-collar and I quit biting this guy and I turn around and bite you and the E quits. Got it. No problem. I get to quit biting him and I start biting you, and that's what makes this thing quit stimulating me. Sure, no problem. Or people who misuse it, and now we're into unintentional consequences, how bird dog trainers use this thing to create drive and stimulation. If you use this improperly and in ever increasing values of stimulation and you're not getting compliance from the out, you're teaching the dog that the stimulation means bite harder, keep doing what you're doing. You make your outing problem worse by not limiting their ability to manipulate this. And this is why I never, ever, ever start my e-collar training on outing anything. Not a decoy, not a toy. I need them to understand how to use common known behaviors to limit the stimulation and make it stop in the gain of a new, different reward to work this in their own benefit. So if you start with the out, you may very well teach this dog to possess a toy harder, to possess a decoy or bite equipment harder, even though that's the exact opposite of what you want. So very, very important to let them have no other option than compliance. Now, why is that important as it relates to the out? Because if I teach them that they are in charge, that they can positively manipulate their own environment, turn the stimulation off and gain a reward, if they can do that for sit, down, stay, go away, come here, go into a kennel, get on a place board, if they know how this system works and it's the same through all of these other arenas, now we have a working model when we move into that out command of how to get them to understand to release that toy. I will mark and pay that and give them a second toy. Then I will eventually consolidate that down to a single toy because I want them to let the one go, to go into, I hate using definitions, drive capping or obedience or stopping that mental state of mind that they are in and going into a controlled obedience while I pick up that one reward and take control of it and then give it back to them for a task later at my choosing. And it's got to come back down to one. This horse shit of trading a toy for a different toy over and over and over is ridiculous. You should be able to get down to one toy, because in a tactical setting, that prey object goes from a toy to a bad guy, and now we're going to be dealing with one bad guy that you're going to let go and get into a just controlled, mentally stable frame of mind while we deal with this tactical threat, and there's only going to be one. I can't have this trading of toys move over into the bite arena where, oh, well, I'm biting this, but then you always have to give me a substitute in return. Nope, nope, nope. We're going to do one. You're going to give me the one. You're going to hold your composure until the end of this exercise, and maybe you'll get something else and maybe you won't. That's up to me. So with that in mind, we're going to hit the E. We're going to use the leash to take them to the outcome that I want with no other outcome possible until they see how this reward works and they learn how to manipulate it. If they can turn it off by biting me, running away, all of these things, you have completely created an entire new problem set for yourself that is not going to be corrected easily. Now, with the pet training, it goes the same way. They don't teach the place first. They do everything that I described as far as putting on the collar, getting that lowest level of recognition of stimulation. Then they put a leash on there to control outcomes. They hit that E and they get it right up on the place board, and then they give a verbal marker and they turn that stimulation off. Then they invite the dog down, and then they come right back around to the place board, teaching and they don't wait to necessarily get the behavior. They will start in many cases, not all cases, but trainer to trainer, some of them will start naming the activity. Some of them will wait. Some of them just walk the dog onto the table and teach them that just jumping onto the table turns that stimulation off. Some of them start naming it right away. They'll say place as they start from the very first rep and begin naming this behavior from the get-go. Either one works. But the big takeaway is the parallel that they are on leash and that they are limiting the dog's possibility to turn this stimulation off by any other means, just getting on the place table. Then they start doing the same thing with the sit. They use the stimulation on and shaping behaviors, both with a leash and maybe a hand on the bum, and they get the dog down. The most common collar in that arena is known as the educator. A lot of people are big fans of them. I don't have necessarily an issue with them for the pet training arena and general use all around your house. They're very simple units, easy to understand. They're not real big. They're pretty affordable as far as e-collars go. It's a good option if you're not out doing heavy duty use and you don't need to control your dog at 1,000 meters away or something high end like that. With that being said, I need to back up for just a second. Nick versus continuous. I am telling you straight from the horse's mouth, from Brian Mowry himself, do not use Nick when you are training or using e-collars on your dog. The point being is this, and this is straight from Brian Mowry. Nick is at the speed of light. It is so fast. When you hit Nick, it gives this speed of light stimulation through the receiver and the contact points of the dog, and it goes so fast that it hits the nerve endings of the dog, and the e-collar stem hits the dog's nerve ending so fast that before that nerve ending can go to the brain and go back to the location of where that stimulation was at, it is so lightning strike fast that the dog's brain can't even locate the source of where that stimulation came from. That is bad. The dog needs to have time for their nervous system to be able to complete that loop and realize the where and the what of that stimulation. If you are going to just bump the e-collar and give them momentary stimulation, if you're going to pump the brakes, boop, 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 do not use Nick. Use continuous, because even as fast as you can physically depress and release that button, it gives enough time for the dog's synapses, for the nervous system, to register the location of that stimulation, go to the brain, and make it back to that collar, and you can let off and achieve the same result. No, you achieve the right result other than the Nick. Don't use the Nick. Another piece of inside Brian Mowry information, Tritronics has now merged with Garmin, but the old school Tritronics handset is still in the new Garmin model, and it has the rheostat on top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it has the two buttons, low and then medium, and then the two buttons together are high. One thing that is not known in the community, and this is straight from Brian Mowry's mouth, the Tritronics is not designed to go level 1 on the rheostat, low, medium, high. Those gradations jump exponentially between those. The Tritronics is meant to go low 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, back to 1, medium 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, back to 1, high 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you have your Tritronics and you are going from low 2 to medium 2 to high 2, you are jumping entire sections of the staircase. These are not sequential escalations in force on your stimulation with the e-collar. These are massive jumps with huge gaps on the staircase, and you are going, you're taking huge leaps in the amount of stimulation. Just know that if you are using a Tritronics unit, go in order: 1 through 6 low, 1 through 6 medium, 1 through 6 high. Don't do that one low, 1 medium, 1 high, unless you have a fully e-collar conditioned dog and you are aware of these massive escalations in stim, and you're doing that for a reason. It is not a reasonable escalation in force to jump from too low to too high on your hand unit if you have a dog that you're trying to e-collar condition and you're in the teaching phases. If you're jumping from a low 2 to a low high on a Tritronics, it's because you have a fully e-collar conditioned dog, and for some reason you've had a distractor or some outside variable really stimulate this dog into high levels of mental energy, and you're really trying to jump on top of that energy and come in over the top and bring it back down. So just be aware of that. So with that being said, we're limiting the options. We're teaching the dog. We show them how to manipulate that. They do that without pre-trained behaviors in the dog training world, and in 2 weeks they're very successful with that, and it works, and the dog knows the same thing. They know how to solve the puzzle. They know how to work that stimulation to their own benefit, and they can respond accordingly. Now, going back to my earlier discussion, I'm staring down the barrel of 50. I grew up in the non-remote era of technology, and I keep working with obviously new guys who come into the program who are young, and I've got some 30 somethings in my orbit right now, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, do they think everything comes from this right here. They don't want to put in the work. They don't want to do the no collar, teach the behavior, name the behavior, get 90%, change 3 venues. They don't want to do it. They think that everything comes through this e-collar, and good Lord, I've got one guy right now, world, dog training world. This is not a microphone. This is not a push to talk trucker's mic. This isn't push the button down and then speak into it. It's not a walkie-talkie. This is remote stimulation, where once you start doing skills and tasks that are outside the reach of a 30-foot leash, that are 50 feet away, that are 100 feet away and more, where your ability to physically touch that dog is diminished, where your voice starts to get a little bit quieter because of the distance between the two of you. Dogs and kids have a lot of parallels. So once this dog is working and you're 50 feet away, and that dog knows you're 50 feet away, just like your kid, I see you. I know what you're doing. You're not doing what I want you to do. Get back on task and do this. Now the calculation begins. Can I do, and now we're back to George Hickox, I have an impure thought. Can I go ahead and act on a bad behavior? Can this impure thought manifest as bad behavior before they can come over here and put their hands on me or deliver some kind of a correction? And I can act on a bad impulse and do something that's gratifying even for a short time, even though I know I'm probably going to be in trouble? Can I do that before they get over here? And in most cases, the answer is yes. That's where this comes in. This is the ability for you to reach over there and touch that dog and give them stimulation and let them know, even though you're way over there, I can still influence your behavior. I can still touch you, even though you think that I'm out of reach. So this is not a microphone. I got a guy right now that I'm about to lose my mind, because every single thing, sit, down, stay, out, it all starts with pushing the damn button. I have not seen a dog yet that is so hard that if you put in the time and the work and you teach the system and its known behaviors, that you don't, if you did this right and you had 90% compliance before you went into the e-collar, right over there in an aluminum crate is straight from my Eastern Bloc Imports video. That is Young Junior Eastern Bloc Import number 2, right over there, that I have spent 5 months training. You're not going to see a drivier or harder dog and more difficult to deal with than him. And go back and watch the video to hear why. I got my 90% in 3 different venues before I introduced e-collar. He is fully e-collar conditioned, and 90, 95, 99% of the time, I get compliance with all my behaviors, and I never, ever have to touch this. And yet I have a guy right now that I'm dealing with who never even starts without pushing that button. And his dog is not nearly as hard-headed as that one. And I can work his dog and do everything that he does and not even put a damn e-collar on this dog. But these youngsters, these tech savvy, tech familiar, tech dependent young guys just want to push that button. They can't keep their damned fingers off of it, and it drives me nuts. So saying that to say this, your e-collar, whether it's an educator where you've gone through a 2-week board and train and you have a pet, if it's a working dog, if you've put in the work, you should only have to hit this 1 in 10 reps, or if you have really stressful externalities, if you've taken your training to a high level and you're putting a lot of moving parts and pieces, additional stress, things that really push that dog's excitement level and energy into the red, into the stratosphere, and you need this to remind them, hey, hello, bring it back down. Talk to me. Hey, talk to me, Goose. Let me know you're over there. Here's your ability to manipulate this system to your own benefit. Come back into compliance. That's what this is for. Even in the pet world, even with Nick White's off-leash canine training, you don't start your command by getting on the button. That's not how this thing works. So, action items. I know this thing's going long. Action items, takeaways, things to think about. Know what training system that you want to use. I'm sorry, I missed a piece. Part of the George Hickok system is his philosophy on correcting a dog. And I've spoken about it in Things Every Dog Owner Should Know Part 1. The elements per George Hickok's that I agree with for teaching a dog. If you're going to correct a dog, there have to be 3 components: meaningful, intolerable, and inescapable. And if those 3 elements are not present to a dog, they're going to see that little gap of fence, that little bit of daylight, that crack they can run through to keep acting on bad behavior and learning bad things. What does that look like in real world terms? An old school correction, rolling up a newspaper to hit a puppy. If your puppy's doing something wrong and you're going to correct it old school, and you're going to go over there and you're going to swat this puppy on the butt with rolled up newspaper or fly swatter, if that puppy sees you coming and can tuck their little butt down and take off running along the wall and outrun you just a little, and you only get a glancing blow, was that intolerable or inescapable? No, it was not. They were able to escape it to a degree and make it tolerable by tucking their butt and running, and you not getting a good contact with your correction on them. Was it meaningful? Who knows? Were you doing this right? Is this a known behavior? Is this something that they understand is bad? Was there already information available where they could not engage in that impure act and get a reward out of it? So was it meaningful? Probably not. If you do everything that I just described, getting that behavior, 3 venues, 90% accuracy, if you put an e-collar on a dog and you've taken the steps to collar condition it the way that I have described, and they know how to turn it off, this thing is strapped around their neck. They can't run away from it. The stimulation can be pretty stout if you need it to be. If you are correcting them on a behavior that they know how to avoid the bad action and engage in a known behavior that has a reward associated to it, it is meaningful, it is intolerable, and it is inescapable, and you will have a good, reliable dog. This dog has known behaviors that they can offer and manipulate a system to get a reward out of. This methodology is ethical. It's something a dog can understand and digest and manipulate to their own benefit. When I go into tactical training, and what some trainers, BORTAC and BORSTAR, will call creating conflict during training, you'll put 2 choices out there, maybe a good choice and a bad choice, or the best choice and a less best choice. Now we are showing the dog a picture where they have a fork in the road. As long as that fork in the road is clear, has behaviors that I know they know how to engage in and get it, Ica, no, here, that I know that they know how to engage in and avoid a correction and gain a reward, I have no problem setting a dog up in some kind of training conflict, or even some people call them setting them up for failure. You're not setting them up for failure. Even though I've presented a bad option, example right now, if I had my 14, 15 chickens loose and I'm throwing and working, retrieving out with a toy, or I have a decoy and bite equipment available, and I put a training conflict in front of the dog, if I have done my intro to the e-collar and I have introed them on animals and distractors, and I've walked them around squirrels or chickens or house cats or other dogs on leash, and I have limited their ability to engage in an actual attack on that dog, and I have backed that up with e-collar stem and stop them, and then once they have come under control, the stem goes off, I have no problem going out in the yard with loose chickens and putting a decoy out there and showing them this is something you're allowed to have, or even throwing a Kong toy out there and saying, you know, you're allowed to have that, and that's a reward you can have, and you are not allowed to engage with chickens, cats, rabbits, squirrels, any other animal distractor that's not available to you, and put them in that environment in conflicted training and say, go retrieve that Kong. And if they go after that chicken, absolutely roll this thing up into a high level of stimulation and absolutely stem them off of that bad choice, because we are operating with options they know how to manipulate to their own benefit. They know how to turn that E off. If I see them breaking for a chicken, I'll get on that E the second that I see them show the proper decision. And if they want, again, our bad choice, our impure thought, and our bad behavior is going after the chicken. If they break off and turn back towards the Kong, the E comes off. If they bail on the whole situation and go into default mode and they run and 180 and come back to me, if they want to come into the heel or back to me into a safe space, the E comes off. That is also included in the ultimate tactical exercise maybe. if we provide stim and that dog runs to the air crate with no door on it, and they're saying, hey, time out, I felt the stim, I'm choosing to completely just disengage from this entire activity at the moment, the E comes off. The point being, I offered them a training conflict and they chose not to engage in the conflict. Any answer other than grabbing the chicken that is correct or even semi-correct will turn that stimulation off and allow them to manipulate the circumstances to their own benefit. So go grab the decoy, go grab the Kong, come back to me, run to a place table or an open air crate if those are available in the scenario. All of those will allow you to turn the e-collar off. That makes this system ethical, and now we have a meaningful, intolerable, inescapable correction, and now we are really communicating with the dogs. So this is really where I'm at on the e-collar these days. That dog is fully e-collar conditioned. Obviously, when I picked it up and took the remote off, she was game time. We're ready. What are we doing? Point me in the right direction. Most days in training, and certainly in and around non-training, but we're still always working and communicating. And that's another thing. Even when you're not actively training, that's part of what I keep telling people is the dog is always absorbing information and gaining ideas about left and right limits. And I'm out of flip-flops to throw. These chickens are driving me nuts. They all want to come in here and crap on the floor. Go on. Hey, go on, chicken. Chicken. That's not a call to action for you. And I'm not fussing at you either. See, right there's a default. She hears me getting testy with the chickens, and she recognizes that as a harsh tone, a correction, and she says, you know what? I don't know what the chickens are doing, but I'm going to pull back in here into Dad's little circle and make sure that whatever bad shit's about to go down, that I'm not anywhere near it. And I'm going to allay her fears. I'm going to calm her and pat her on the head and tell her, nope, you're good. We're good. That's got nothing to do with you. But you're always training. You're always engaging in some kind of interaction and input from your dog. And they're always going to have a takeaway, whether you intend that to be the case or not. They are going to take something away from it. So try to close out here. Your action items. Figure out what methodology of e-collar work you're going to train in. Get some help with it. There are tons and tons and tons of knowledgeable people out there. Find out which one squares with your engagement with your dog, if it's pet training or if it's a working dog scenario. Look at all of the e-collars. They are more affordable than they've ever been. There are more options than there have ever been. Again, with the young guys in my orbit right now I'm dealing with, if one of your sales points to your e-collar work is, I want the little push button remote that I wear in the palm of my hand, that I need to have that kind of accessibility and frequent use of my e-collar, that it needs this little key fob push button that straps to my hand, you're doing the wrong kind of training. You're in left field. You don't understand. You don't know the long-term ramifications of this, and you annoy me, and they know it. So right now, find out what you're going to do. I am not paid for, not sponsored by. When I showed up at the kennel I'm at now for the day job, they had tons and tons of Dogtras. I had used Dogtra before, and it suits me just fine. George Hickox uses DT Systems, which has a bunch of features that he is really favorable to, which is the rise feature, which is a button you hit and the stem just goes up on a steady curve. It has a jump feature, which is where, okay, I've gotten my normal number that the dog is responsive to, and now I need a number that jumps way above that if I need to get on top of that building energy and mental state and cap that and bring it down quickly. So there's DT Systems. That one is also for gun dogs, sport guys, field sports. Has an incredible range. The collar has a piece of external antenna wire that goes all the way around the collar. So it has a ton of range via that long antenna. I have a Garmin integrated e-collar, which has the full Rhino Horn GPS screen, and it has the tracking unit on the dog where I can see that. That is not for training a dog. It's a great system. It's a great collar. I love the GPS feature for more high-end advanced work and knowing where the dog is at in relation to me, even if I don't have eyes on. But the stimulation is not agile. Engaging in e-stimming the dog. This is for once you have a fully trained, conditioned dog and you're doing more high-end stuff, and the only reason you're hitting that button is to correct a pretty major issue with the dog to bring them back into compliance, because getting into the screens and the buttons required to change that level of stimulation, it's not agile. So if you're out on the OB yard and you're just correcting little things, and all of a sudden you require a higher level of stim, that's not what that unit's good at. This is for high-end stuff where I just need a higher than normal level, because I'm only going to be hitting this thing once in 10 or 20 reps, or maybe not at all if things go well. And I just need to intervene in those impure thoughts or bad behavior on a limited basis, and I don't need a whole lot of adjustment. What other collars do I have? DT, the Garmin, the Dogtra. Man, you can spend some huge money on e-collars. You don't really need to. My wife does pet training. She's got educators. The educators are neat. They're user-friendly. They're simple. They're good all around. That's what Off Leash Canine uses. And they do have the little remote light on the receiver unit, so you can turn on visible light for your dog remotely, whether you're out walking a dog on or on off leash, or letting them potty break after daylight hours. It's a neat little unit. It's not what I would prefer or use for my line of work, but there's nothing wrong with it. And they're, like I said, they're super reasonably priced. So again, I never have a script. I'm sure there's something that I'm leaving on the table. Again, that's a really long video. My feedback overall in general is most people like the deep dives and really getting down into the weeds of it. E-collars are great. Maybe you don't need them. Maybe you do. Get some instruction, get some help. If you live somewhere and you want to get some e-collar training, send me you can hit me on Instagram at P2TK9 on Instagram. You can put it in the comments on the video here, and I know people all over the country, all over the world. Let me know where you're at, and I'll try to point you in a direction of someone in your area who can assist you in getting the e-collar training that you're interested in. They're not inhumane. I think the methodology and institution of e-collars is way better than it was 25 years ago when I started. Hands down, zero question, no debate about that. Unfortunately, as our society becomes more soft and more hippy-dippy baloney, the e-collar still has a negative stigma attached to it, just like with the pinch or prong collar. And I addressed that in my last video, or the one prior to that. Some of these things still have a stigma attached to it. At some point, there is no 100% voluntary reward-based system that a dog is going to be reliable at. At some point, just like kids, they're going to test the fence. They're going to be satiated. They're going to have enough Bill-Jack treats or liver treats or enough Kong exchanges during the day, and they're just going to want to not do it. And they're going to want to see what happens if I don't. And the e-collar is a great way to backstop known behaviors and do it in an ethical manner and keep your dog under control at all times. There's nothing inhumane or bad about it. like I have described, if you do it the right way, come here, Ika. If you do it the right way, it's on a level so low that it's generally imperceptible, and it will be an infrequent occasion where you have to ratchet that up and really hit them with a higher level of stimulation. So these days, the kennel that I'm at now at the day job, they all want e-collar condition, collar integrated training. So I do that. Some of them listen to me and put in the work. Others don't. They want to be remote control guys. It annoys me, but the world is what it is. You don't need to hit the button every time you talk to your dog. It's not necessary. If you've put the work in, you shouldn't need it. So we'll close out on that. I'm certain I'm leaving something on the table. I will end the video and immediately think, crap, that was a big point that I should have hit on. But anyway, I'll leave it there. Hit me up if you got more. Talk to you again. Please like, subscribe, share the video. Thank you so much for your support.